Live stream audio check 3-2.
Good evening, everybody. Are we good to go? Okay. Right, so the usual thing, welcome to all of you, members, visiting members, and members of the public, past luminaries and present, I guess we could say. So this is a meeting of the Cabinet. Let me just walk through the notes of welcome that I have to, and the practicalities I have to address, and then we'll crack off into a long agenda. All right, so action in event of emergency, let's hope for none. No practice alarms planned for the evening. If alarm sounds, please evacuate Town Hall, going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall. In the case of any disturbance, which I trust will be unlikely, we'll withdraw using the doors behind us and await further advice. Let's hope we don't have to do that. This meeting It's being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will be available to listen to afterwards. So anything and everything we say to each other is out there forever. Use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is fine, but you're requested to use them discreetly, not to disturb the meeting, set them to silent, not to use voice or camera flash. Speakers, and many of you have done this before, to use the microphones at all times. Let me introduce the work of the Cabinet. The Cabinet's the main executive body of the Council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and also makes recommendations to full Council, as we will be tonight, on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet's made up of 7 councillors. You can see them bar absent Paul Smith, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. And I should make sure, not assume that anybody knows who I am. My name's David King. I'm the leader of the Council, and I'm going to go to my left first and ask members and officers at the table to introduce themselves. So Alison, please.
Councillor Alison Jay for Highwoods Ward, and I'm portfolio holder for economic growth and transformation.
Lovely.
Councillor Natalie Summers, portfolio holder for communities, heritage and public protection, and ward councillor for St Anne's St John's.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Pam Donnelly, Chief Executive.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, portfolio holder for resources and representative of Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan, portfolio holder for planning, environment and sustainability, and ward member for Wivenhoe.
Martin Goss, the ward member for, or one of the ward members for Mile End. There are 3, not just me, and also portfolio holder for neighbourhoods, waste and leisure.
Thank you very much. Okay, so item 2, urgent items.
There are none, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. I invite Cabinet members to declare any such relevant interest. No, okay, none. Minutes. I invite Cabinet to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of November.
Approved.
Thank you, that's great. Item 5 is have your say. Just give us a second and some will want to speak on items in the agenda. I'll take them then. But we've got 3 now on public have your say. There's general statements and questions. So Bob Russell on local government reorganisation, I think. Bob, come forward, you know this very well. Thank
you. I wish to speak on the government's English devolution white paper, which is riveting reading. My concerns are, I think the only person in Colchester who's still around or still active in one form or other from the last time local government reorganisation happened more than 50 years ago. But that didn't mean that Colchester Council would disappear. It was an enlargement, and that's 4 councils merging to create the Colchester Borough Council, then became the Colchester City Council. And what the government are proposing is the biggest attack on local government in Colchester from when we got our first charter in 1189. So it's the biggest attack on decision making for Colchester in 836 years. Colchester Council was not even threatened during the English Civil War or the Siege of Colchester. But the current government is proposing that Colchester ceases to exist in local government terms. But I don't think the Labour Party manifesto intended that, at least it didn't say that. What they said, on page 41 if you want to know, was Labour will transfer power out of Westminster and into our communities. And that's good. That would be marvellous if that was passed down to the existing structures. But what is proposed for this part of Essex is an amalgamation of tendering, Colchester and Braintree. And by no way is there any dictionary definition which would say that is local. A council stretching from Jaywick to Wethersfield is not local. The Government Minister, Jim McMahon, I'm sorry, Chairman, this is one of the most disappointing and saddest document I've ever seen in local government terms. It's an absolute travesty. The word democracy doesn't appear once. The word democracy does not appear once. The proposal, the only example they gave, would see a reduction of 2/3 of councillors stretching from Jaywick to Wethersfield from the current number serving Tendring, Colchester, Braintree and Essex County Council. It would mean that Colchester City Council area with 51 councillors on the City Council and 9 on the County Council, 60, would be reduced to 20. There's no way that that is local government. This is sucking up power rather than putting it down. Chairman, my only concern tonight, just to finish on this, is it's not on the agenda. I thought it would have been on the agenda because just finished, Mr. Mann said he wants invitations or applications from 2-tier council areas in January. The Essex County Council held an emergency council meeting. I'm disappointed that Colchester hasn't done the same.
Thank you very much, Bob. Let me reply for us. If Mark might want to add something, but let me just try and address the central points. Look, there is no question that this feels a done-to exercise, and I felt that from the very moment that I started to hear what was underway. But there is a real practicality about how the City Council has to respond, which you'll understand. We have to respond on the facts to the proposals which have yet to come to us, the response from government to the expression of interest to which you refer. So we have to have that back, see what it says, see if it is as proposed, 3 into 1, which is, I think, probably the favoured option amongst many, and 5 unitaries across Essex. But there's no question this is going to happen, is my sense of realism about this, given that the 3 upper tier authorities have made their application. So we haven't heard yet back. We have to go through the process. You will understand. Well, no, we don't exactly understand what it is, and a lot of the things that will matter to those who care about local government and that connection to local councils representing their interests has yet to be worked through. At the beginning of a process is the truth of the matter, despite the headlines. Now, we've been very open. The government, in that sense, have been. Certainly, we tried to put communications out which will help members and the public understand if they're looking at this issue. What is coming to us, but the proposals in terms of the go-ahead, the response to this, which requires an interim proposition by March from all Essex authorities, and an outline, a deeper outline by the autumn. We're in the process of working. We're in the process of working towards that, which is why, in my view, it wasn't right to go to and have a full council debate or bring this yet to cabinet, because what is it we're bringing? What would we bring to full council? We have to see what that is and have a response and have some sense of how that will fit with colleagues and counterparts across North Essex and beyond. I just want to add one other thing, apart from recognising, again, your vivid language, which will resonate with many. We will have a heavy heart about the loss of Colchester City Council for all the reasons, tradition, history and effectiveness to which you allude, but we are determined to make the best we have. What that is to be determined. We will look at civic traditions that need to perish, urban Colchester. We recognise there's a whole set of things at risk if this comes through. I will say, for fairness, and nobody would want this, that in the midst of this, there is, I think, a genuine proposition for a devolution. But again, the scope and scale of that and how that's going to be exercised, we have yet to see. Thank you. Mark, do you want to briefly add to that?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I took some time when you were away at some of the meetings to represent and listen and take part, as well as being an Essex County Councillor who was there at the meeting and did not vote for this, and made my views very clear there. So I concur and have very similar concerns to you, Sir Bob, about this, especially about local democracy, and this will see less local democracy End of story. It is a way in which government, national government, will be able to dictate policies more from a centralised position. I do teach politics and studied it. We are one of the most centralised in Europe as it is. We're going to be even more centralised with this. So you can be reassured from David's words and from ours as a cabinet and for the wider council, we will be fighting for the most localised options possible. The county council undertook work through Grant Thornton and their maximum of unitaries was 5. So that's a geography that's still immensely large, and that's the smallest of the unitaries we're talking about. So we will aim for that, the maximum amount of unitaries and the most localised of them. But it could be larger than the 3, Colchester, Tendring and Braintree. It could add on another authority or 2, depending on what wins out and who wins out. But I will be fighting for the most localised possible. I've spoken with the leader on his return about how we ensure local input. Voices like yours with the experience will be really helpful along the way, but also about ensuring our councillors are kept up to date. And the leader has done that. So our councillors have seen everything that the leader has seen and this cabinet have seen. We're still waiting for that letter from government following the county council and the 2 unitaries, Thurrock and Southend, putting forward for the process. So once we've got that, then that is when we can do the best local consultation, and we will do that with members. We have now got a date in the diary for a full sort of workshop where we can contribute as local members. The government itself is determining consultation for local residents, so I'm sure we'll try and maximise that to the best possible potential. And I do agree the reduction of councillors scares me. We have enough to do as it is at the moment in our communities. We enjoy the work we do. I enjoy knowing my residents and them knowing me. At the county council meeting, the leader of Essex County Council said we need politicians to be more professional and less of them, more professional. I think that's the opposite of what the public want. They don't want professional politicians who do it for all of their life. They want people who are in the community, understand different job roles, and can be there and not for such a vast geography that you don't know who it is and you're just voting for a party or a face or a name on the ballot paper. So I think there's a lot more work to be done, and we will try our best to keep the localism as much as possible. That's something Liberal Democrats do fight for. It's in our blood, but we'll work with all the members on this council. I know there's mixed views across the council, but I think we're all keen on maintaining Colchester's excellent reputation and its civic and historic and heritage background. We cannot lose any of that. So Councillor King has talked about the parishing and the movements of ensuring we maintain as much of the civic heart of Colchester as possible. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mark. Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate what you and Councillor Corey said. That is very encouraging. And I just think back that 3 years ago, we were not a city. As things stand, in 3 years' time, if we're lucky, we'll be a parish council.
Thank you, Bob. I mean, we are very keen on retaining or securing city status. Just to be very clear, it's really important to us, as symbolically and practically, Bob, to keep civic status as we have it. We are a city, and that was not given lightly. So the way ahead will very much be about ensuring, and some others who've gone through this process have managed to do it. So there are ways of ensuring we stay what we are, a proud city, regardless of what happens around us. Thank you. Jocelyn, Councillor Jocelyn Law, please. Thank you, Jocelyn. Haven't seen you since 10 o'clock last night, Jocelyn.
So, thank you very much. Good evening, Leader and Cabinet. I'm here speaking tonight as Highwoods Ward councillor and resident. I can say that, myself and all other residents, children and families were really delighted with the newly refurbished play park at Gavin by Brinkley Grove Primary School, or the Pencil Park as we all fondly know it. We all know that public facilities like that are really important in terms of creating spaces for social connections and improving health and well-being. Safety, though, is also an important feature, and I know that it's really great that in the newly refurbished play park, there's sort of rubberised safety surfacing across much of it. However, under the new zip wire feature, there isn't surfacing underneath that particular feature. And residents have raised with me concerns about safety because we all know what kids are like. We're apt to sort of tumble off those sorts of equipment midway through. So I wanted to come along really and ask you, leader and portfolio holder, if you would consider extending that safety surfacing, you know, across other sections of the play park to provide the safety benefits and features there as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn, and a number of us know that site really well. Playgrounds and play areas are, you know, a fantastic asset for the reasons you've described, so thank you for raising the issue. And I would just say before I hand to Councillor Goss, you know, I think there will be a number of discussions before the budget's finalised about what else we might do in, you know, in the years ahead to ensure we strengthen and renew where we can. Martin, thanks.
There are 73 playgrounds in Colchester, and there are quite a number that need refurbishment or safety improvements. So it will be down to priority, and there is a whole schedule of work that officers have come up with, and it's all been prioritised. So there is already that detail available, certainly at least I've seen some of it, and it will be down to funding and priority. Quite simply across the whole of Colchester, and of course that includes play parks at Dedham, Mersey. It isn't just about the urban wards. So we will look at the request along with all of the others for all 73 play parks across Colchester, and it will be down to priority of what is needed most based on safety, age, and of course funding, because without funding we can do nothing.
Thank you very much, Martin. Jocelyn.
Sorry. Yeah, I completely understand, and it's important that resources are in place to, you know, refurbish and renew where applicable across the borough and across the city in different wards. You know, so I'm supportive of those as well. But obviously, you know, I've come here tonight as Cabinet as particularly, you know, in my remit as ward member for Hirewoods. So I just, again, put my request in politely and thank you. I know there will be, you know, considerable discussions around the budget and works programme. So thank you for taking this on board.
Thank you. I think Councillor Corey wants to add one last remark.
Just in case I forget when it comes to the budget items, you may have seen in the budget papers that there are line items about priority spending going forward, and to support Councillor Goss in that remit of play parks and their upkeep and expansion, we are, under this budget, under this administration, committing to play park investment. So that is in this budget already, and I can't guarantee that coming your way, but I can say to Councillor Goss, as he well knows, that that is an area we believe needs to be invested in for our residents across the city and the rural areas to ensure that we provide for our families and children. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. John Acker. John, please. I think you know this well enough. Experienced hand.
Good evening. As ever, thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking to the Cabinet. It's a privilege that I don't take for granted, but it's very much appreciated that I can speak to the executive body for the City Council. Can I firstly say that I've very much wanted to be associated with the remarks which were previously made about local government reorganisation. I was hoping to stand as a candidate in May, and I regard it as completely anti-democratic that I'm not going to be allowed to speak and to stand at a time when there are so many important decisions affecting Mersey and I believe the whole of Colchester. But the subject I want to address the Cabinet tonight is arrangements to hear members of the public at the local plan committee on the 17th of February. I am very concerned about the ability of members of the public to be heard, and the opportunities of speaking will be very limited and will stop the engagement with them, to both, I believe, the detriment of the local communities and I believe the council itself. It will be known to the council that as a result of the government policies and the updating of the local plan, that there will be a new analysed total of housing will be required around 1,300 houses per annum for a normal span of a local plan, which is 15 years. This is a substantial total and will greatly impact on local communities, and particularly in the rural areas, and there will be very strong views felt. To move to the next stage of the plan without the committee hearing not only from local councils but residents would, in my view, offend democratic principles and will provide a lasting sense of injustice that will, in my view, stain your reputation. As it stands at the moment, there are only 8 contributions allowed, which will include parish councils. So that members of the public being able to make representations will be very limited. I speak out of consideration of the last local plan. Councillor Goss will remember this, that we had 970 individual objections to the plan. We came with coaches from Mersey in terms of that. So what I say is that there's only going to be 6 days notice, or working days notice, between the publication of the preferred sites and the others, and that the council ought to consider arrangements to properly hear the residents that come forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to Andrew first.
Firstly, John, I'm grateful to you because, you know, it feels to me that the planning world is like walking through quicksand. It keeps changing. We're constantly updating our evidence. The NPPF is changing. It's a commitment, and one I respect of you, that you do it for your community. And I just wanted to say that I'm personally respect that position. And as you also know, it's not so long ago that I was that side of the table, so I completely feel your frustration. The only thing I would say is being over this side is not actually that much better. And especially when it comes to the local plan, the reason being that the local plan is got a committee all of its own because it's so very important, and they set their rules and framework within the bigger framework of the council. So on the side you won't want to hear, we've had to tighten up have you say rules, because we're spending, you know, an hour and a half of a 2-hour meeting doing have you say instead of getting on with the business of the council. On the flip side of that, you know, I think that I've mentioned to officers, and I know that the discussion has taken place with the chair of local plan, that this is a particularly, let me put it in crude terms, it's going to be a bun fight. And I think, you know, that is reflected in the fact that we've booked Charter Hall. We know lots of people are going to want to come, and that the chair has already agreed to extend the number of have you say speakers to 10, and he will also use his discretion to try and balance that out. So, you know, instead of having 3 people from one site, that you try and get geographically some sort of coverage. I find that personally frustrating, and not to criticise him, but, you know, we've got 17 wards. Some of those wards have more than one village in them. The other thing, like you, your frustration shared across the whole council is nobody knows yet how many houses are going to come into their ward or what sites they're going to use. So we're going to have exactly the same, well, we probably won't, we'll probably have a little tiny bit longer than the public will notice of when those will be, but it won't be significant. I think you've got it slightly wrong on the how many days. It's not 6, it's 10, because you get a couple of weekends in there. And I appreciate, again, if you want to go through the entire evidence base and the whole of the agenda, you'll probably have to work for that whole 10 days just to get up to speed. And then to turn up at a meeting and not have your say is going to be incredibly frustrating. What I would say is if that proposal is accepted by the local plan committee, then we'll go into Reg 18 consultation period, which gives you 6 weeks. And in many ways, that's not the inspector's consultation, that's a pre-consultation that will give everybody, regardless of whether they're a councillor or a member of the public, the time to fully consider the sites that are included in the plan review. That's obviously before we then go. There is still time at that point to change things. I'm told that there are a few sites in reserve that we could move around. I don't know how much flexibility there really is going to be, but apparently there is some sort of flexibility, and that's before we go to the inspector's Reg 19 consultation. The other thing to bear in mind is that councillors will be limited, have a time limit. They'll be allowed to have 5 minutes instead of 3, but I don't think the number of councillors that come along is limited. So, you know, if you've got 3 councillors in Mersey, I don't think I'm making that up. I think all councillors can come and speak. So, you know, certainly if I was chairing that meeting, I might ask it to be 1 councillor per ward, but there is that opportunity for you to talk to your ward councillor to make those representations. And one would think, because it's non-political, it's whether it's the right site or the wrong site, that you will all be able to agree. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would say is that I did ask in my last portfolio holder meeting if it was possible to delay February the 17th, because there's an awful lot of evidence that we haven't seen in full yet, anybody, and I'm sure that if officers could have said yes, they would have done. I think the problem is that in order to hit the deadlines we're expected to be delivering within the process we've got to work to, you know, we've already pushed that date back once. We're not going to be able to do it again, which is unfortunate. So, oh, and last thing, I think devolution sucks.
Okay, let's stay on the subject. But thank you very much. Can I just add a couple of things, John, before we come back to you? I think, you know, I was struck by your note and your words, and listened to them as I know Andrea has. And thank you, Andrea. That's, I think it's richly rounded. There will be, if you take it all together with what we haven't talked about, which is individuals can make representations, parish councils make representations. Let's see, I don't want to say that for the chair and the committee that we can, let's look forward to sailing past 970 objections, but we can imagine, can't we, there's going to be a significant response, and some will do it in headline terms, not here ever, and others will find the time and draw on their knowledge to put forward thoughtful representations, as I know you would, and I echo Andrea's words of thanks and acknowledgement to you and others who invest that time. It's a significant thing, and it makes a difference to the vitality of the city when it comes to public debate. So genuinely, you know, thank you, Andrew, for saying it. I'd like to echo it. But if you put together the fact that you will have that wave of representations, you will have that 10, I hear, opportunities to have your say. You will have members, absolutely, and I'm sure they'll be encouraged to represent their interests. And you will have a committee that is going to be doing its very best to balance the many considerations. I hope that actually counts as, and it's one start, a long journey, as a genuinely democratic process, you know, being practical about it. Thank you. Back to yourself.
Sorry, for the amount of time which you gave, Andrew, in your response. I look at it really from the point of view of the body politic, because although parish councils can have their say and individual councillors can have their say on the 17th, what I'm looking for is a question of, frankly, Joe Public. reading in the media what is going to happen, and their ability to come forward and say to their elected representatives what's happening. And what I'm saying is, frankly, from the heart, that it's in your best interest that you manage this in a way that people are not so frustrated. But following on from what Andrea said about the 6 weeks period, perhaps can I say this to you, is that you make the maximum possible in terms of making it available to the public, that there is this opportunity of putting that forward.
On that note, officers are looking at a system of online consultation. Unlike some of the impenetrable consultations we've done in the past, I think it's a model that is much simpler to look at, and basically where it's been tested elsewhere, the numbers of responses have gone up significantly. I'm very keen that we do not lose physical, person in a room type consultations, because they're very, very important, especially to certain types of quite hard to reach people. But what I have, God, I'm going to have to give credit to a developer. What I do like about developers is that they nearly always set up an online consultation, which means you've got a lot more time to consider stuff. Instead of standing around asking questions, you've got more time to consider the written things on it, and then pause and think, and then go back to it when it's convenient to you to do so. So that is something that I believe we're piloting for the Reg 18 consultation, and officers are quite excited about it because they want more people, strangely, they want more people to come back on those consultations as well, and they feel that in other areas this has worked, and then so hopefully it will for Colchester as well.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Andrea. Right, on to the main business, which starts, unless as often happens, I'm corrected by officers, with item 7.1, which is the draft budget proposals for 2025-26. I'm just going to say a couple of words and then go to the Councillor Corey as the portfolio holder for resources, who has had the joy of helping ensure this is drawn together and taking it through robust, together as a cabinet, robust rounds of challenge and improvement. This is, for example, the third iteration of the medium-term financial forecast. There's been a number of rounds of discussion with members and workshops, leaders, alumni, all to give some test and challenge and to help us for the wider council and for our residents do the very best that we can. So, Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you to give your very personalised précis. I see you scribbling still, so we'll see how it comes out. We did have a very interesting and challenging set of conversations yesterday at scrutiny. I think they, in the round, by virtue of being so to the point, added a real value to it. But before I do that, Mark, I want to acknowledge we got some have your say visiting speakers, councillors, Paul Dundas, Judy Young and William Sunnox. I'd ask you if that's okay, and I'm happy to pull up a chair if you want to, but I would like to take you in the round if that's all right. Otherwise, the real risk we'll repeat both last night, which is a cross-party scrutiny, but also for each of you touch on the same themes. I promise you we'll try to respond to the key issues. But if I can just take them, so we have a theme in turn, and then we'll respond at the close. So, Paul, could you come forward, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to try and avoid going over things which have been spoken about many times, but there are a few areas which I do want to highlight, which I may well go back on that statement. But firstly, I have seen a little bit of scrutiny from last night. I haven't yet watched all 4 hours, but I will dedicate myself to doing so. I would like to endorse their recommendations. I think there were some sensible recommendations in there, and I hope you accept them. I'd also like to bring your attention to the recommendation made by the Governance and Audit Panel, which was, insofar as it is permitted by accounting standards, all transactions fall within the orbit of the income and expenditure account, and no transactions will be taken out of usable reserves without providing the information to councillors, notwithstanding that this would require a confidential section of the income and expenditure account. And that's important because if you look at the budget at face value, it shows a surplus of £87,000, and £87,000 going into reserves at the end of the year. But as we know, that is not what will actually happen, because you have things in there which will use reserves. Therefore, you're not actually complying with the recommendation as it stands for the governance and audit. I'm not going to go into too much detail, not because it's confidential, because anybody can work out the figures, but because I'm aware that there are discussions going on and I don't want to jeopardise anything. But you have a cost code in there, 3844, in your budget papers, which shows a surplus within this year of 457,000 and a surplus next year of 517,000. But we know that's not going to happen. Neither of those figures will actually occur. Within this year, you will have a substantial charge to reserves against it, and next year you will have a substantial charge against reserves to it. And for the casual reader, the councillor or anybody, it's not immediately clear what's going on. And that is why that recommendation is so important, I think. All the activity in the council is not being charged through the income and expenditure report within the budget, because there are things which are directly being charged to reserves, albeit earmarked ones, but it's all a bit 6 to 1 1/2 isn't it? You take it out of the general fund and then you move it into an earmarked one and then you take it out of the earmarked one. So we need to know what's going on, and even if it ends up in a confidential section, I would urge you to put that in. I would also ensure that, I assume that when it comes to the budget before full council, there will be a treasury management statement, because within the paper tonight, you haven't got a forecast to reserves of 31st of March 25, nor have you got a forecast to reserves of 31st of March 26, which means you are passing a budget where you don't know what's in the bank, to put it in simple terms. We did have it last year. In fact, there it is. That's the one which was in the budget last year. Now, I assume that will be forthcoming before February the 26th, but I'd like reassurance that it will be. Other things I picked up on, the national insurance contributions, we see a figure in there. I think that it's nothing to do with you, but it's very disappointing that the government, having made the commitment that councils will be compensated for it, have clearly gone back on their word on that. They have actually very inadequately compensated us for the increase in national insurance, and there seems to be no guarantee that it's actually going to go beyond 1 year that I've seen. We don't know exactly what will happen, but they seem very vague on that, and in my experience, when somebody's vague on it, that's not a good sign. There's a few other things in there I still note. We still have fairly poor performance at the Northern Gateway Leisure Park. It seems to be improving slightly. I noticed we're still losing £30,000 on the coffee shop. We spoke about these last year, but as a council, they may be small amounts, but we need to address them. And I still think you need to flesh out, and it was spoken about at scrutiny last night, more about how you actually intend to close the gap over the next few years, because there is a big structural deficit there, and we simply haven't actually got the reserves to cover it. I'm sure you've got ideas, and we know they emerge every year, but some detail is needed. So I think that's probably all I'm going to say on this, because I don't want to overstep the mark, but please look at that recommendation from the Governance and Audit Committee. Please accept it, and please follow it. Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much, Paul. I'll come back to you when both of us will come back to you, Mark and I, when we've heard from all three, and then make one thematic story. Thank you very much indeed. Julie.
Good evening, Leader and councillors. I want to start by thanking the officers for the hard work they've done in putting together this budget. Here we are again, another budget round, seems to come round quicker every year. In talking to Bob Russell, he reminded me that in 50 years ago, when the new council was formed, we chose to build Leisure World at that time as a legacy project and use our resources in that way. And I think actually with the thought of local government reform and the reduction of members, as we're going to see, maybe down to 20, it's become much more acute to make sure that we use our remaining budgets for the good of the Colchester community, because we might not be here for much longer to be able to steer those decisions. So, you know, my hope is that we will, through this budget, target our resources to where the most need is. Martin Goss spoke about 73 play parks. Councillor Corey indicated that there was some dialogue in the budget that talked about priorities, but actually the budget line that I've seen in Appendix A only signifies 141,000 for play parks, which isn't going to go very far with 73 sites. And, you know, Councillor Andrew Vaughan talked about shifting sands on planning, but I think all around us we've got shifting sands, and we as a council have to respond to those shifting sands. And I think about the letter we've just received from the Police and Crime Commissioner. We know that that's going to make communities feel less safe. And as we're thinking about setting a budget, we need to think about where the gaps are and how we're going to actually address those gaps. So I didn't want to pick out any particular financial points in the budget proposals. We have competent and professional officers. We are lay members, and we rely on their good advice to actually deliver a balanced budget. But for us, it's about political choices, Leader. And I think that's where our focus needs to be. We need to give the direction. We need to make sure that the money is in the budget to follow that strategy. But I think our sharp focus has to be on how we deliver those programmes of work in the short time that we may have remaining. So that will be about capacity to deliver. We know that there's a lot of work to do on our assets. Standing in a building, we know there's a lot of money that's needed to put that right. I think everybody in Colchester won't forgive us if we conclude our work in this council and not have our heritage in a good state for whatever council is developed going forward. I'll leave it there. I mean, I looked at the detail around sport and leisure. I don't know whether it's Paul down the Tiptree leisure services and perhaps Jocelyn Highwood, but that seems to have a much improved position than when we were last year. So I do think staff in that area are doing a good job to turn things around. We may not be buying as many coffees as we need in the Leisure World Cafe, but we have to look at this in the round and see the improvement that is there. I'll leave it there and look forward to the debate we will have later on in February.
Thanks very much, Julie. William Sunnox, please, William. William, please, thanks.
Good evening. I too would like to thank officers for an incredible amount of hard work, and they've been very helpful to Paul and myself in trying to get under the skin of the budget. And I want to talk about just one thing this evening, which we didn't even mention last night. It's about the capital budget. And I've been trying to find one word to sum it up. And the only one I can come up with is bonkers, which is the technical accounting term. And why is it bonkers? You're going to approve this evening, I suspect, a £40 million capital budget for next year when your own forecast shows substantial structural deficits. And that doesn't include the HRA spending, which is an equally crazy problem. The council was told to sort out its capital programme by a peer review 2.5 years ago, and it's still not done. We never seem to get our projects moving, and there are long delays even when we're given the money by central government. Schemes are rolled forward from year to year, reprofiling the spend, as we call it, and there seems to be a reluctance to take decisions and provide clarity and sort it all out. Surely we need a realistic, deliverable plan for what we'll spend in a year, and once we have the money, we should get on with spending it. This poor budgeting wouldn't matter if it weren't for the rules, which I worry we're breaking. The SIPFA Prudential Code requires our capital budget to be prudent and affordable. We're obliged to look at future years, but all we can see is deficits with no plan, no specific plan to close them. Same point as Councillor Dundas was making before. No one seems to know whether our capital programme is affordable or not. It's like leasing a top-of-the-range Range Rover with no idea how to fund the lease payments. Did you realise that the £40 million capital budget you're about to approve for next year, if it is ever spent, will increase our financing costs by £3.5 million a year for the year after? Did you realise that our 5-year capital programme, if it gets spent, will more than double our present debt? On the face of it, our budget breaches the SIPFA Prudential Code. We can only take comfort from our history of underspending, which is embarrassing. So my message is, I think we need to make decisions, get the town deal and levelling up money spent on something useful, and we should get out of speculative property schemes, which I think the Northern Gateway one is costing us about 2.7 million a year in finance charges. It's eating us alive. And the overall message is that we will never solve our long-term financial problems by salami slicing on the operating budget. It's amounts of 50 and 100,000 that we can save there. We're not going to do it. We need to look at our balance sheet and our capital spending. The figures are like 10 times bigger there. So I'm absolutely serious about this. We really need to get to grips with the capital budget. When we come to local government review, we'll get a lot of scrutiny, and going in with schemes like that will just make us look silly. If it's in the budget, we need to get it spent and get on with it. And if we can't do it, and we've got to recognise our limits, we shouldn't put it in the budget.
Thank you, William. As ever, vivid, if you don't mind me saying it, including your opening remark, which I think it's one of the first times I heard that from you in public session. I think I've probably heard everything else, if I might say that. Let me just come back to you, if I might briefly add a couple of remarks. This is not the place, being practical about it, to go through each of the sometimes technical points made, but if I make a start, I'll ask Mark to pick up on what he thinks might be particularly helpful for anybody listening. So let me just address the capital programme, which I've taken a particular personal interest in, as somebody who has done this kind of thing elsewhere. And let's be frank, you draw on your experience, so does everybody else. I don't think a capital programme is bonkers. I don't think it's anything like that. Less sure about the numbers you quote. They may or may not be correct, but in the round, as we talked at some length yesterday and have before, we have a capital programme which is a mixture of what the City Council has chosen to do and resource from its own funds, which, you're right, will have eventually a charge that will come back and will have to be worked its way through. Have an HRA, a housing revenue account, a housing programme, which we're frankly in the round proud to have 6,500 houses or so that provide living space for people who desperately need them, to look after people who are homeless. All of that is the right thing to go and do, but we've given public assurances about that, as we have town deal and levelling up funding projects which are funded by government and which we've committed to deliver as soon as we're able. There are some practical constraints about that which we've talked through elsewhere. So in the round, looking at it in terms of those big chunks and components, whilst I'm absolutely with you, and I think we've made some real progress, I've seen it in the last months, the last 6 months and year, in terms of having a closest possible understanding of what the realities are of delivery. I'm with you, as I say, in terms of having to have that grip. This council has the right kind of ambitions, has an appropriately sensible approach to those commitments, inclusive of contingency on time and cost, and an HRA review that before there are, beyond the coming year, significant further longer-term commitments, will test robustly the viability with external advice and a very open challenge process within which I'm sure you will take full advantage of. In those circumstances, I'm really content, personally content, this is the right direction. We will see whether the fresh programme and the undertakings that lie behind the budget calculation will be met, but it's the right kind of direction, and really substantial progress has been made in response to a challenge we sought, the council sought cross-party from the LGA, from peer review, which concluded go and sort some of this out, go improve the structures which will ensure we deliver. We've done that. So I'll stop at that, William, if I might, for you. I'm going to ask Mark to pick up Paul and Judy's remarks. I will just say, Judy, we absolutely get political choices and direction really matter. And if I would, I won't address Paul's remarks, I'll leave those to you. There's an important thing to remember. What we have in front of us has the word draft. Now, I expect there will be some, though they should be minor, some minor adjustments that take account of both the process of scrutiny that we've gone through, the requests that have been made of Councillor Corey and Cabinet in terms of extra information, and some of the entirely legitimate, is there something we can do to be clearer about what we're intending to do and recommend to full council? We've got a little more time. There will be some minor adjustments, not least in terms of how reserves, which are that opportunity to invest in the city whilst we have the opportunity to do it. So, William, bear with me if I allow a space for Mark to pick up on other points that matter most, but not the technical detail, if we can avoid it. Mark.
Thank you, David. So just a number of points really, and then I'm not sure whether I'll flow into the report or with you.
I will ask whether any of the visiting councillors want to exercise their right to storm to the table and add a response. I'd be grateful if they didn't, but I'd understand if they felt they should. So, Mark, to you first to address the residual points, and then we'll see where we are.
Thank you. So, just try and take the comments as they came. I agree with Councillor Dundas's insights on some of the requests from governance and audit. We will endeavour to follow as much as possible in terms of clarity, transparency with the reserves reporting. We will follow the correct guidance as per the reserves and ensure we show the movements that take place. But governance and audit asked for sort of updates on that rather than year-end reporting. So we will endeavour to do that through confidential papers as best as we can and highlight them in advance of them happening. So we will endeavour to do that. Also, in terms of Julie's comments as well, the one other point from Councillor Dundas was about the Northern Gateway and the Northern Gateway Leisure Park in particular. So at the moment we are continuing to forecast in the budgets in terms of what we see as the revenue transactions there, but he's absolutely right, and I said last night at scrutiny that we have to be clear about that site and clearer in the reports going forward. At the moment we need in our budget the income from that site, and we are not going to achieve that, so therefore we have a £4 million reserve primarily named Northern Gateway Leisure to support the smoothing of that budget whilst we're waiting for the full commercial uptake of the units up there. That has been trailed in the media, and we have ensured we've updated the public as we go, and we hope to have good news in the future about that and can start moving towards meeting that income target. Just moving to some of Julie's points, absolutely agree we need to use the resources of this council for those who need it most in Colchester. The needs of the people of Colchester will be addressed by this budget and in the coming years before we move into LGR. That is not to say at all that we'll run down the budget of Colchester. We need to pass on a council that is fully functioning and a council that can carry out its operations. And on that point, I'd say that in this budget, I have put in there line items where we will spend some of our reserves, but in a capital way, capital one-off spending, because we already see the deficits coming down the line on the revenue budget. We need to meet those deficits head on by making efficiencies, making savings, extending Fit for the Future, looking at other spending that we do, and pulling that back, so we cannot go further on revenue spending at this point. We need to meet those needs through capital investment into our communities, and that's outlined in the report, which I'll come to later. In terms of comments to do with capital review, I just wanted to address that we did undertake a capital review as per the local government organisation peer review. We went through a full review. We did involve a wide spread of members on that, and we have revised the capital programme twice since. So we are addressing the capital programme. We have said publicly that we have had to scale down some of the ambitions. We continue to look at what projects are possible and are not, and we will stagger the programme in terms of, can we deliver it, can we not? Do we need to take out the borrowing at this point in time or not? And each time we will review that in terms of investments into the capital programme, and when we revise it, we sometimes will make the savings because of MRP and capital financing, and we'll be very clear about that. But I will say that we will continue to work on the town deal and levelling up projects with the partners that we have. We hold the budgets on it, and that's why it is in our capital programme, and it will represent slippage when we, through partners, are waiting for the delivery of projects. That is not Colchester Council directly. Most of them are actually outside of our direct responsibility. So we will carry that, and unfortunately that is something we cannot change. What I would say is we have made decisions in a capital programme since I've been on this cabinet where we have delivered for Colchester, and Fora 1 and Fora 2 sit there next to Rowan House, bringing in income each year for the people of Colchester and are assets that are of great worth. Rowan House itself has had a project completed on it, which sees us now getting greater income in from external partners using the building, and it is reducing the cost of our energy year on year. We've delivered the Northern Gateway Sports Park. We've delivered the Northern Gateway Leisure Park, of course, delivered it, but having to ensure it is let out over the next few years. We've delivered the walk, which we had investment from government to deliver. We've delivered the ground source heat pump, which sits under the ground ready to go when the Northern Gateway mixed development goes forward. We delivered the Mercury scheme, which has seen great investment from other partners into it since as well. And we've delivered on the council home schemes through the HRA. And we've delivered on the Queen Street business hub that's almost finished. So I see a lot of areas where actually we have put spades in the ground, cranes in the sky, and we've got external investment alongside our own into capital projects in Colchester that are delivering for people. Elfrida House is one that's now keeping our old residents warm, and many more than what we had before because of that project. So I will continue to back the delivery of our capital programme. I'll continue to ensure we are ambitious, but we will continue to monitor it and review it as much as we see fit to sort of ensure we deliver as quickly as possible, but that we meet the prudent regulation, so to speak, that we deliver affordability in the way that the SIPFA rules apply. So those are my summary comments.
Thank you. Really, we seem to get more of a response than anybody else. So, but I hope everybody feels listened to genuinely. You know, we took into account all we hear. As I say, it's a process that's got us to this point. There are a few more weeks to go yet before full council. So I'll just reiterate, draft budget, heart of which will not need to change, but if we can help build both consensus and add the clarity, then we're going to do that before we close it. So, William, is there anything you need to add before I ask your colleagues the same question?
No, I don't think, I just hope that what I'm saying sinks in somewhere and that we start looking at the big picture as well as the small ones. It is important.
Thank you. It is. And I think the structural conversations and the fundamental difference between private and public financing and accountability, which we've talked through, we're closer to an understanding of each other, I hope. Well, that's going to continue, and I welcome your passionate endeavour to improve us. Thank you very much indeed. Julie or Paul, is there anything you'd like to add? No, well then I again, genuinely on behalf of us all, thank you very much. Mark, I think some of your pitch for the whole budget was delivered there with relish and flourish. Can I ask you to pick up on the budget papers as they are in front of us now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So this is the budget proposals, the draft budget proposals for 2025-2026, including the general fund and the housing revenue account and the capital programme, as well as an updated medium-term financial forecast, which we term the MTFF. So I want to say thank you to begin with, and thank you to councillors, councillors who've been part of the scrutiny panel, councillors who've been part of the G&A panel, and those who've attended the alumni sessions that you have set out, Leader, to involve a wider inclusion of councillors of all parties, which I think is really useful. And we will keep listening. It is a draft budget proposal, so we will keep listening to councillors who have come here this evening. Thank you. And we will continue to revise as best as possible to deliver the best for the people of Colchester. I want to thank the scrutiny panel last night for their commitment to scrutinising the budget and the proposals that they've put forward. So the recommendations, A to F, from the scrutiny panel, Leader, I am happy to accept and work on in a timely fashion to ensure we get those responses to councillors when they can be produced. So that may be that they come in part, but they should come in full way before the full council meeting. So I suggest we include those as part of the recommendations that we find on page 23. So the recommendations as part of the budget are to agree the revenue and capital budgets. Oh yes, I will keep going. The fees and charges to agree the medium-term financial forecast, to agree the council tax increase, to agree the housing rent increase, and the management fee to Colchester Borough Homes. So those are the recommendations and the scrutiny recommendations. So the basics of the budget are that it remains our proposals, it's gone through scrutiny, it's here at Cabinet tonight, and it will go to full council. The reason I keep emphasising draft proposals is we still have an element from the government settlement that we need to focus on, which is the national insurance contributions, which was mentioned at length last night by me and others at scrutiny, been mentioned this evening by Councillor Dundas as well. We have put in a cautious amount there to have relief of 50% of the national insurance employer contribution amount that we have in the budget. I hope it will not be as low as that in terms of government relief. They promised full relief. We'll see what they give, and we're hoping to hear within a week or so. In the budget, we do meet, as the government implies, an increase in council tax to 2.99%, below a referendum amount, but like many others, it's one way in which we are able to bring in the money that we need to run the services. We are delivering a balanced budget despite the difficult times in local government finance. We are delivering a balanced budget this year that we are confident of. It's a budget of around £30 million in terms of the operational funds that we can deliver on and make decisions on. It is a wider budget overall if you include the incomings and outgoings of council tax, business rates, benefits and others. The HRA account is in there too. Explained that the net operating income is forecast to be 0.794 million, so delivering a surplus we predict over the year, which we predicted last year, and we met that requirement. So on page 23 as well, one thing that I have alluded to already this evening is about the contributions we would like to make in line with political priorities of this administration and the councillors, I believe, across party who would like to see investment in Colchester. And that will be using reserves as capital investment, one-off investment in the line items that I've talked about this evening, which we will explore, which include the asset condition spending. So we know, thanks to the work of the corporate landlord team, led by Patricia Barry, that we have assets that we need to be looking after and investing in order to maintain them to a high standard. We have play parks that we want to invest in and support Councillor Goss and the teams that are looking after those in our communities, to look at the open spaces related to those play parks as well. And something you've been working on, Leader, which is working with Team Colchester and Essex County Council on, I'll be blunt about it, a better bus station or terminal, transport terminal. So that is in there as well. It's something the residents of Colchester really do want to see progress on. And along with that, also a review into the support we can give to communities around infrastructure, such as community centres across our patch. So those are just some of the ideas and line items that I wanted to talk to about investment. The rest is more difficult in terms of fit for the future, delivering on savings, which are already outlined in the budget for this year and next. Some areas mean we need to go, in some areas we need to go further in order to address the forecasted deficits for the coming years. So throughout the year we will focus on that, ensuring we deliver on the savings, but actually that we go further to make sure this council is fit for purpose, fit for the future, and fit to go into the new landscape of local government reform. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark, for that overview of what is, let's remind ourselves, a really significant budget that will make a really significant difference to the lives of people. It's choices, isn't it? And we're going to continue to make them in a way that we know ensures the essentials are delivered, but adds to them wherever we're able. I just want to ask Cabinet colleagues for their particular highlights. So Alison, Andrea, and then Martin. Thank you.
So from my point of view, I think first of all, I would just echo the good work that's been done. From my point of view, I think we have far greater detail and clarity than we've had. I've been a member of Cabinet now, this is my second year, but I think the detail we're getting and the understanding has really helped us in this process. I also am grateful for some of the challenges from outside the Cabinet group, because I think that has helped us focus on what we're doing and what I think we're doing well. From my point of view, obviously there's the capital spend in terms of operational transformation and the digital work. It's taken some time to come up with a governance digital strategy, but there are now real clear improvements in terms of work being done on the website, procurement. We're looking at something later tonight on new laptops. There'll be a new mobile strategy coming later in the year. From my point of view, I think the really big work will be the future customer work. Our contact and support centre already work really well for residents. They've recently undergone a customer service excellence assessment and had a glowing report of compliance and Compliant Plus. But I think what we're doing is looking to make the real best decision on how the experience looks going forward. So looking at all ways in which we contact with our customers and perhaps moving back to some face-to-face, which over the previous years, mainly due to COVID, we've pulled away from. And we accept that that is what some customers are looking for. I think that's probably, and in addition to that, we're also focusing really hard on the member experience, and that will be coming in the next few months as well. So there'll be better access, easier access for members, which will help us do our jobs better than we already do.
Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful. Next.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I was really pleased to see about the EPR scheme, or the extended producer scheme, that we actually get money from the government to help us dispose of all the excess waste that we get in packaging and things. So that's really helpful to go into the budget there. And it's great to see that we've got the grant funding as well for the Holy Trinity, and we're also putting some more money towards Jumbo to go with the 8 million we've already got from the National Lottery Heritage funding. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with Jumbo and the Holy Trinity. And also the community facility at Kingswood, having a million for that. I think that's great to do with the health and wellbeing partnerships, and an extra 0.3 million going towards the repairs at the Natural History Museum. Again, we've also had funding there from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to reimagine the museum. It's gone out to a consultation, and there's some fantastic ideas that I'm really looking forward to seeing the development of that. And also when it comes to fees and charges, I think we've made some sensible increases where we need to, but also I've been pleased to be able to keep some of the pest control fees, particularly on bed bugs, because I know that's been a big issue recently. So pleased to have not had to increase those charges. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin.
It's about investment in Colchester, and all of the services I'm responsible for tend to be customer facing, so either they're really popular or really unpopular, depending on what's happening at the time. So it is about investing in the future of our waste collection service, taking that forwards, although there is some confusion from DEFRA at this moment in time about separation of paper and card, but we're working through that. So it is about investing in cleaner, greener waste collection services, increasing waste collection for flats to include food waste going forwards as well, to support the Environment Act, which means less tax is wasted on landfill and more is recycled. It's also about investment in play parks. Obviously there's some work to do on which ones, but it is about listening to people in Colchester. And the biggest issue that we really need to get moving forwards, which we will be shortly officially, and we'll publish that when we can, is the removal of the weir and ensuring that Essex County Council can then get on and repair that bridge expeditiously in Castle Park, opening up a really important link for residents in Colchester and in that part, which will make people much happier. So they're just some of the highlights, I think, from the budget, supporting people in Colchester, listening to what they want.
Thank you very much, Martin, all of you actually. And for my part, before I pass on to Mark for a final couple of remarks, and then we'll move to recommendations to full council. I think, just listen to ourselves. This is about investing in the future, and we've given lots of illustrations: Holy Trinity Church, Jumbo, it's in Regeneration, and that reflects an ambition which is more than just administrations. It's across full council, and whatever the debates, that hasn't wavered. We're pretty united across the council, and we, the administration, reflect that general will, which is to invest in that future and to leverage additional investment from our partners. We are very good at this. We have a city we've played some role in ensuring is seen as an attractive destination for private investment as well as public investment. And I think it's easy to forget those successes. They're difficult to secure. They take a long time to arrive. They take longer to deliver, but they really do matter. And the fundamental of the budget that supports that, despite there being a gap to close in the coming year, is a robust one. On independent advice, on the affirmation and assurance of our Section 151 officer, our senior team, our deputy. And I was really pleased to have had an independent third-party view. I won't mention the individual, it was a senior professional who said, given where local government is, in Colchester, and this is, for me, all of us, members and officers, we should be proud of your position, because, and this is not to take that for granted, because it's hard won over many years of developing a track record, whatever the debate, where problems year on year do kind of get sorted out, and we do have a forward plan. Whatever our challenges of its delivery, it's there, and it provides a baseline on which we can work. And I want to thank, I know you want to thank officers, but I'd like to associate myself with that. I think we should really take some pride in this across the council with our officer team, and recommend accordingly for my part that we approve this. Mark, the last remark.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, we've been working with Andrew Small as Section 151 officer and Chris Hartgrove as Deputy Section 151 officer, carrying out the detail of this budget and the budgets over the last 2 or 3 years, working in that joint setup with the Epping finance team. And we have accepted capacity issues have been stretched. I explained last night the market for financial expertise and officers is really difficult in local government. We are moving forward with an interim setup very soon, but I wanted to thank Chris and Andrew as the working relationship does come to an end. They are helping us constantly right up until the end of the financial year, and they will do that. They will ensure a smooth transition. But again, their detailed and diligent way in which they go about it is really commendable, and I wanted to say thank you to them and thank you to the officers below who feed up and ensure that we address each deficit that we face and have faced for quite a number of years now. So it's a whole commitment from the council led by Chris and Andrew. So thank you to all of those. I commend this budget to Cabinet.
Thank you, colleagues. As set out in 2.3, covering every aspect of the documents in front of you, taking account thus including the requests put to us by both governance and audit, and certainly for scrutiny, are you content?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. To be really clear, the recommendations, which are in the supplementary agenda, Part A, about the draft budget proposals, and there's A to F, briefing notes, advice, information, confidential and otherwise, including references to SIPFA. We accepted that last night at scrutiny and confirmed so today. So those recommendations are accepted. We'll do our very best to get out that information. I can say now that one particular item we're already looking to apply, which was getting fresh advice from our Treasury Management advisors, and we will factor that into a refresh of the budget, and we'll share that with members. So I'm grateful for the advice. I know you are, Mark, as well. It's a robust discussion. We need that, and we certainly have that. So yes, inclusive. Thank you. Mark, we need to move on to 7.2. Would you like to pick that up?
Yes, I believe we have Councillor Paul Dundas to speak on that, or do you feel we've addressed that already, Paul? I believe. I'll just check the leader's notes.
7.2, Paul, is Q2 budget monitoring report.
Yeah, I think
I look up and you're there.
I know, you can't get rid of me, can you? It was actually, I did mention it, I did say it on the last item, but yeah, just for clarity, it's the recommendation for governance and audit, which is, well, there's two recommendations actually. Consider which items of the capital programme are deliverable within the current financial year, and the one regarding that all reserves movements must go through the income and expenditure account. We had a long discussion in governance and audit about it. I think it was a quality discussion actually, and nobody, there were some abstentions, but it was passed by the committee. I think it's a good recommendation, and I hope you accept it. Thank you.
Could I respond then? Thank you very much for affirming the recommendation, Paul. And our response is a positive one. You'd expect us to have already looked at, and indeed the budget reflects this, a review of capital items. That's the first of the recommendations. And of course we should continue to do that. And a really important point about transparency, which is there has to be a welcome for when things go awry, people putting their hand up and saying that. As a culture, I encourage. Let's hope we have less slippage, more delivery. We've reset the programme, so the first point's taken, and you'll see that. See updates. Members will see updates regularly. The second point about transactions, I have just a caution, because this is technical accounting to some degree, and we would want to take the advice of our professional advisors, whether it's whatever that might mean. You'd expect us to say no more. But we understand the sentiment, which is about clarity. And you made an earlier remark, didn't you, about different parts of the budget needing to be squared, which we've accepted. And I've said that to you personally, so that is a commitment. But the central point, the second recommendation, is around usable reserves. And the way this goes, there will be more clarity in the eventual budget when it goes to full council. And absolutely, Mark and I and fellow members of Cabinet agree that if we're going to do anything of substance, then the right thing to do is ensure, using the mechanisms we've got, that we share that. Right? We've got governance and audit and scrutiny. We'll follow the rules in short, and using the discretion that we do have, we'll make sure that's an open process. I hope that's okay. I'm seeing half a nod, that will do for me. Thank you, Paul.
So on that basis,
On that basis, are we content?
agreed.
Thank you. In which case, go to 7.3, Mark, business rates.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the business rates discretionary rate relief policy 2025-2026. And we have Adam in the audience, Adam Wood, as our lead officer here. Thank you, Adam, for you and your team's work on this, or the future work that will be carried out. And also, I've mentioned this before, how the team will have to support businesses through a tough change that will be seen due to government policy change. So what this paper outlines is us as a collection authority on business rates, in particular, following government policy and following what they ask us to change and what they ask us to collect. So the main items are the changes to business rate relief. That applies to retail, hospitality and leisure. So the relief that currently stands at 75% in a discount of business rates is due to end on the 31st of March 2025. I've spoken to a number of businesses about this and there is quite a bit of concern. I've offered them as much as I can in terms of empathy and support through our teams, but there's not much we can do financially with these changes coming from national government. They will be replaced by only a 40% relief from the 1st of April 2025 this year. We've also had clearly outlined by government a manifesto commitment to change the way in which they regard private schools. As of the 1st of April 2025, private schools will no longer be eligible to receive mandatory charitable relief of 80%. And that will start applying in terms of collection this year from the 1st of April. The last one, not many people would have known about, but local newspaper relief. I'm sure the Gazette will be keen to write an article on this one. It's also ending from the 1st of April 2025 as per central government policy. The recommendation, therefore, is to approve the business rates discretionary rate relief policy to full council, or to send it to full council for approval and adoption to allow our changes to fall in line with government for the 1st of April 2025. I commend this to the Cabinet.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. In which case we go to item 7.4, which is just page 241 of 326 for those who are excited by this. Right, Mark, over to you.
For those that are still excited, hold. This is the Officer Pay Policy Statement 2025-26. I remember that back in, I think, 2011, the then Secretary of State for Housing and Local Government, Eric Pickles, now Lord Pickles, decided that it should be a prudent thing for local authorities to publish their officer pay statement each and every year. That should be approved by full council. This outlines the officer pay hierarchy and how we deal with those in terms of the living wage, which we have been paying for quite some time, and explains those that from the top to the bottom in terms of how we pay. In the appendix, it explains the numerical data behind this and the explanations of what a chief officer and below means. I'll leave it there, Leader. We continue to support our staff with the living wage from the bottom of our staff rungs up to the top. We have included the pay awards each year and have negotiated and met with the national pay increases despite having a locally arranged agreement here. So that's as much as I can explain on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope to remain a good, inclusive and fair employer, and one that's attractive as much as we can be to both existing staff and those who may seek to join us. So I recommend this. Do we agree, colleagues?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, Mark and colleagues. I'm conscious of time. It's coming up to 7:30. We have got a little while to go yet. A short break. I suggest just 10 minutes. Could we make sure we come back and restart at 20 to 8? Please, thank you. welcome members, officers back to the second half. But we don't need a third leg on the long journey through the agenda. Next item, well, we've done 7.4, haven't we? Pay policy, says carefully. Next item is item 8.1, Colchester and Essex Regeneration Partnership, and pleased to welcome Councillor Paul Dundas. Paul, we sit around the table on this. I'll welcome your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I don't want to spend too long on it, but I just thought it would be useful perhaps to recap as to how this has come about and why it's come about. And it actually goes back several years, and it actually goes back to when I was leader of the council in your position, and Councillor Andrew Ellis was portfolio holder for planning, and we were conscious of the fact that Colchester City, or Borough Council as it was then, had a number of projects and a number of land ownings around the St Botolph's area, and had one or two development projects in way or being planned. At the same time, Essex County Council also had a regeneration project right next door. And what we discovered is there wasn't really a great deal of communication. In fact, there was no communication between the two on the two projects. So we were concerned, hang on, we've got two regeneration projects here. We're going to end up with nothing actually joining up at all. So why not start having the conversation and seeing if we can actually make them work together? And out of that grew Team Colchester, which I think meeting tomorrow, I believe. Which sort of took on a bit of a life of its own, and from that developed the city centre master plan. None of these things are perfect. You know, different people want different things out of joint working. But I think on the whole, doing this together, firstly, is unlocking extra funding. It is going to give us a more joined up project. In the end, it is putting two authorities, or they may well become one before too long, but at the moment it's putting two authorities' weight behind it. I'm not to talk about the legal terms, I'm not a lawyer, but in general I think it is a step forward. I think we need to do it notwithstanding anything happening regarding local government reform, because frankly we want to get on with this. We would both, I know, perhaps like to see a bit more emphasis going on as regards transport and bus stations and that. But what I would say as regards bus stations, if we do this, we might get a new bus station. If we don't, we won't get a new bus station. So I hope you approve it. I will, when it goes to full council, I assume it will go to full council in February. I will certainly be backing it then, and I should be encouraging my group to back it, and I hope we can get unanimous support. So it has my full endorsement.
Thank you very much, Paul. Andrea, you wanted to offer a remark? I'll then respond.
I just wanted to support what Paul had said. I think it was developed by my predecessor as a dialogue. I think it's been fully supported by this administration, and David in particular, who loves working with Essex. And I think especially with the project you mentioned, the bus interchange, you know, if only we could get something out to the public, that is that we are considering this, we are looking at it. A lot of it's going on behind closed doors, but as soon as we can go, yeah, we're doing it, I would be much happier.
Thank you. And that, I think, helps where I might talk to this myself. So there's just no way around this. Let's acknowledge a hard fact, which is sometimes relationships are good, both personal and professional and collective, and sometimes they're not so good. And I can remember some years ago being in a room with my counterpart at county, and there being a very, very difficult conversation which told me, the first time I'd seen this, just how far apart we could be when we are sort of cousins, at least, in the local government family. Team Colchester's benefit is in two parts, therefore, for me, Paul. The first is the one described, the potential for regeneration by pooling of assets and resources, and as you've rightly said, the effect is to add to the weight of investment and investment potential in the city centre, which will bring a lot of benefits. It is true, it's slow, but we've made real progress on principle and in some detail. And the second one, over and beyond that, is those better relationships, that language of Team Colchester, making us collectively get closer to being an institutional habit to think how can we work together, brings benefits that ease relationships and frankly help the citizen get a better service from their two tiers of local government. And that narrowing of gaps born out of the work that you and Andrew Ellis started has continued. And I know you, from your own words and our private remarks, we would have said that we're in collectively a much better place. The LGR may mandate that, but there's a few years to go. And in that period, the exciting thing is that what will seem a bit abstract, agreeing to a regeneration partnership with the County Council, is going to develop some real fruit. And I think we're all agreed, Andrew, aren't we, that amongst that would be some form of transport hub. And I thought the way you characterised it, Paul, was spot on. Only if we do this have we a prospect of doing that. And without it, we will not. So I'm subject to any other comments from colleagues. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Judy Young, at least summertime. Judy, you've been kind enough to join us, and this is a cross-party endeavour. And I think we're all, again, it's one of those illustrations of how listening to each other, working together, takes some of the heat out of what could yet be some difficult decisions. But they are leading down a path where we will regenerate parts of the city that need it in accordance with the master plan we collectively have agreed. So without further ado, and thank you, Paul, for coming to the table to speak for all of us, I refer you to the recommended decisions, which is to approve the adoption of the agreement in line with the draft notes. I prefer more detail, but it's heads of terms, and it's a very clear start point, and to delegate to the Deputy Chief Executive the authority to so amend.
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you, Paul. Next item is around key performance indicators, a really important subject. Tells us where we are, how we're doing, all of which matters. We think we performed pretty well in the round, but we need to hear the whole story. And Alison, perhaps you'd like to talk us through this report.
Yeah, we're here tonight to review the performance against agreed performance indicators. This is the half-year performance, April to September. We're obviously some way moved on from that. I do have some updates. And where the indicators not being met, just making sure that appropriate corrective action is in place. We also have a scrutiny recommendation to look at in respect of one item that came up in my scrutiny appearance in December. So Council has agreed 20 key performance indicators which are grouped and aligned to our strategic plan. At the half-year point in September, 10 targets have been achieved, all green, 4 were nearing target amber, and 4 did not meet the full target in red. This is actually an improvement on the year-end position, where I think we had more in the red. Of the 10 KPIs that have been achieved, some of them have been exceeded. So those in relation to housing benefit, local tax scheme, and receiving benefits, we are well below the average target that we are setting ourselves, so teams are to be commended for that. I think really what I want to focus on are just a couple of those that are particularly in red and that members have had some concerns over. In terms of household waste and recycling, we're on target there, but fly tipping has gone up. We're already 300 over our target for this year. There is some reflection on this, that fly tipping is around 1% of collection, so it's not a huge problem, but it's obviously an important problem, and only 1% of that is green waste. What it appears to be are black bags and a lot of recycling in black bags, and that is an Essex-wide problem and a national problem. I think there's been things in the press today about increasing fly tipping. Where that's come from, I haven't quite been able to bottom out. There seems to be an element of summer turnover. So as we had students moving out and tenants moving out over the summer, there was an increase. And I'm not not convinced that the booking system changes aren't having an impact. I have anecdotal evidence, I think, that that's the case. Having said that, I've asked the team to update the figures, and actually in the last 3 months there's been a 17% reduction in incidents, and in the ward where we had the biggest issues, Greenstead, it's actually dropped 30% over the last 3 months. So I think some of the things that the team doing to focus on it in terms of engagement are beginning to work. In Highwoods, which as you're aware is my ward, and in September we introduced CCTV in 2 sites, one of which was funded by Myland Community Council. We've actually seen a 51% reduction in fly tipping. There were only 9 incidents reported in the last month, so I think we can see that some of the action that's been taken is really having some impact, and I'd encourage other parish councils, perhaps with money to spare, that it probably is worth the investment in their ward. Sometimes it's just a deterrent. It's not that we're actually catching people, but people knowing that it's there, that it's changing behaviours. The wardens are addressing fly tipping, and we've issued 122 fixed penalty notices. We've prosecuted effectively, and as I've said, the CCTV being used across the wards. And as well as educating residents, I think there has actually been launched today something Essex-wide, a campaign in trying to encourage people, as I say, to recycle their waste and not to fly tip. So I think we can be fairly confident that the figures may well be above target. I wouldn't be surprised by year end. We're already in excess of that, but and what I'd like to do is look at the target we set for next year to make sure that that's realistic. I think last year we actually had a 20% reduction, so the figures look worse this year than they would have done if we compared them to the year before, but that's just statistics, that's how that works. The other red flag is obviously the sickness rates, both in terms of corporate and the waste and recycling. The sickness rates have increased and still continue to do so. Not significantly, but we've yet to see any impact from the new occupational health service, but I think that will probably take some while to roll in, and I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the teams are under quite a lot of pressure at the moment. Waste teams, winter months, the rest of us with all the change. So again, I think we need to be a bit realistic about targets and maybe accept that things are not going to be good for a period. That's really, on those targets, all I think I'd want to highlight. That households, we're well aware of temporary accommodation, that continues to go up, but we are seeing some positive signs of the balance of where people are living is changing. So the Beyond the Box scheme has made a huge difference. And I commend the portfolio holder and the team for working really hard there. The costs, it's had an immediate impact on costs, and we're moving people away from less suitable accommodation. So there's actually a reduction of 161 residents from temporary into better temporary accommodation. And we stay very aware, very focused, I think. I continue to monitor these closely and press for updates. In terms of the strategic plan, delivery plan, again, I think we're on track with a lot of those. We, again, probably need to be aware of the impact of things like business rates and higher mortgage rates, and how inward investment, the impact on growing our economy. But in terms of delivering services, improving health, well-being and happiness, most of our actions are on track, and there is an agreed action plan of a large number of items for the coming year, which again we will continue to keep an eye on. In terms of the scrutiny recommendation, I was asked to consider whether we could make available to parish councils tools and enforcement powers needed to take action relating to fly tipping. This might not be easy. We have a number of non-parished areas, or those that are challenged and possibly can't step in, but I have spoken to the Community Health and Wellbeing Manager. He is chairing the Town and Parish Council Forum, and on our behalf he's gone out to town and parish members and just asked them what their issues are, what their challenges are in terms of enforcement, whether they be interested in supporting us locally. And I'm expecting a report February, so we will continue to work on that.
Thank you, Alison. And I should say, I'll go to Martin in just a minute and any other member, because the point I want to make is that you do your best to keep a watch over the whole of the area.
I try to, yes.
And I know when I did that myself in the past, that is actually quite concerning, because your level of knowledge will, in some occasions, not be as deep as the portfolio holder. So thank you from us collectively. I'll go to Martin and to Natalie, please. Thank you.
It's worth remembering that a fly tip could be putting a rubbish bag by a litter bin, or filling filling a litter bin, a public litter bin, with household waste. And I've spent quite a lot of time catching people and making sure the evidence is passed on and they get fined. Simple as that. And we are going to be doing some PR shortly to remind people that fly tipping is illegal, and putting a rubbish bag by a litter bin is fly tipping. Unfortunately, from some research that's been done, I think by Keep Britain Tidy, the great British public don't seem to think that putting rubbish in a public bin that should go in your household waste or be recycled, or putting black sack waste by a public litter bin, is fly tipping. And that's part of the problem. That is part of the problem. So we will be tackling that with some communication fronted by me to try and ram that message home. The second thing that is worth saying is that WISE, the organisation that we work with very successfully to issue hundreds of fines every month for fly tipping and littering across Colchester, because that's what the people of Colchester asked us to fix, they will be doing more work and have been doing more work to support fly tipping investigations. So we have more resources being put into that already, and they will support the Colchester team as well, and they work as one across the city trying to deal with that as well. So just a couple of points on that. And I think in terms of sickness, that just continues to underpin that moving to wheelie bins is the right thing to do on those very physical routes, because over 3/4 of Colchester are still on black sack, without question. And I think therefore it just underpins the business case that we move fully to wheelie bins as soon as practically possible over the next year. And I think that should also see a reduction in sickness. It would be useful, I think, in the KPI report, although I do get to see it, the breakdown of staff sickness between wheelie bin routes and non-wheelie bin routes, because I think in the past, if memory serves me correctly, the average sickness was 11 days on the more physical route, and on the wheelie bin route it was 8 days. So it's 3 days less. So it's still high, but certainly it proves that wheelie bins do help our staff. And we also, of course, have an ageing profile in that workforce as well, which means that they will be more sustainable to injury. And that's something else we need to take into account. I'm not sure you can really do a KPI for an ageing workforce. Frankly, it's probably rather illegal, but anyway, there's just some conjecture and thoughts from me.
Thank you very much indeed, Nat.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Jay's comments on the number of households in temporary accommodation, and the brilliant work that the portfolio holder, Councillor Paul Smith, has been doing with the Beyond the Box project, because it's, obviously it is still temporary accommodation, but it is much better quality than putting people in bed and breakfast. With Beyond the Box, they have their own kitchen facilities and laundry facilities, which isn't something that you tend to get in a B&B. So whilst it's still temporary, it's a great improvement on the bed and breakfasts. Obviously, it also represents a huge cost saving for us, because obviously bed and breakfast accommodation is very expensive, and the local housing allowance still hasn't been increased since I think it's 2011. So that's not great. So this Beyond the Box initiative is a real benefit, both to people in temporary accommodation and to the council.
Thank you. I'll go to the Chief Executive in a moment on that issue. Pam, if I'll just say a couple of things very, very briefly. The first is, I know that the latest stats, which Pam may refer to, we've halved the number of people in the worst, let's be frank, the worst of temporary accommodation. And that's just fantastic news. And Julie, if I catch her attention, we're having a conversation, aren't we, between CBH and others who've had views and ideas around how we might help people actually get out of, when they come out of temporary accommodation, set themselves up. And I think that was half a gap is how I would describe it. And I think that sort of community support from different sources with some help from CBH can make a really material difference. So Julie, for my part, may say so. I think thank you very much. That adds to what's started to be done or has been done. And it's that ladder out of a desperate position. You know, we those of us who are lucky enough to have a home can forget this. And we all have some insecurity in our life, but I think it's a moment just to acknowledge for lots of people, for thousands of people, insecurity is a reality. And if we can help them out of that, and this is one way, that's just great news. I'm sorry, Pam, I hope it doesn't steal any thunder. Over to you.
No, not at all, but I just couldn't let that reference pass without commenting on Councillor Summers' reference to the Beyond the Box programme, and to publicly thank Philip Sullivan and Karen Lohman from CBH for their leadership under Councillor Smith's direction, and also to make sure that Cabinet and colleagues in the audience are aware that such is the recognition of the innovative nature of this work and the impact it has on massive savings to our budget, and equally importantly, huge improvements to the quality of life of the most vulnerable, and some really heartbreaking stories about the difference it has made, that Philip and I were invited with the university to meet with Pat Fadden, who's the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and Georgia Gould, one of his ministers, to meet with them through the auspices of the County Council last week, and they were incredibly impressed, which is lovely, that's all very nice, but more importantly, keen to see whether the Colchester work could be scaled up across the country. So I think that's a real testament to the work of our staff under the political leadership of Paul Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we've heard from Councillor Goss and Somers and Jay. Thank you, all three of you. Anybody else on this item? If not, I'll close it, if I might, and refer it back to you, Alison. I mean, this is just for us to note, isn't it? Okay, I think the only thing I would just add is just worth bearing in mind our focus is upon what else we need to do. But 14 out of the 18 at the moment measurable KPIs are green or heading that way. And you know, this is not to do anything other than acknowledge we've got more to do, but that's in the circumstances we're in, the challenge circumstances we're in, that's very good. So anything else from you, Alison, and then we'll quickly close.
No, I'm happy to move on, yeah.
Okay, so we have reviewed. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. That's 9. We have taken account of 9.1 in terms of the scrutiny recommendations as well. Thank you, Alison, and thank you for following that up. Go to 9.2, which is also under your portfolio, digital device purchase. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a decision here to delegate responsibility to the portfolio holder for economic growth and transformation, working with the Director of ICT and Transformation for approval of the award of a contract for the supply and management of digital devices. There's some background to this in that July 2020 Cabinet approved procurement of desktops and laptops for staff across Colchester City Council, enabling people to work independently of the corporate network, and obviously at the time increasing the ability to remote work and allow for flexibility. The council obviously needs to invest in replacing these devices which are ageing, and obviously the security requirements become increased as we move through time. They're starting to fail memorably in the annual business rates meeting. I think one of the officers' laptops completely failed in the middle of a presentation. They're working with me on the contract award, and we've had the opportunity to negotiate advantageous terms through the inclusion of 3 local authorities and taken advantage of an improved warranty arrangement. Future device support will be simplified by utilising similar devices across Colchester Council, including Amphora and CBH, and Epping Forest District Council. It may well be extended to Braintree should they take up utilising the contract in the future. They're looking at extending the warranty for an additional year, which will cost in the region of £55,000 per year. If they didn't, there would be an impact on the negotiated trading value on existing devices, which they're using as an offset arrangement. Purchasing the devices outright rather than leasing works out to be more cost effective and allows the organisation to extend the lifestyle of devices past 3 years. Subject to market fluctuations, at the time that we actually go ahead, the expected cost of a standard device is around £735.40, which includes this 5-year warranty. And on an expected number of 680 devices, this equates to a contract value of £500,072. It's envisaged that 2/3 of the laptops will be required and deployed in the first 2 years of the contract. There's additional background information in the report, which I assume people have read. I did have an update from on the sort of value for money side. We've looked to see if Essex County Council are currently working on a device procurement exercise, and they're not, so we had to seek an alternative route. As I've said previously, we've joined up with Epping so that we can use joint buying power to secure volume discounts. We've looked at a secure buyback for existing devices, and we're using the government framework to select a supplier, which gives a selection of pre-vetted suppliers, saving procurement and officer time. The award of the contract will be overseen and ultimately approved by the portfolio holder. And what I'm seeking is agreement for the delegation.
Thank you. I think it's a robust case. I know you've taken a personal interest in this, Councillor Somers.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, you can't underestimate how frustrating it is for staff members to have, and councillors to have equipment that just doesn't work a lot of the time. The amount of time it can take up trying to get these things fixed, and obviously the frustration it causes to members and staff. It's just to have actual laptops and devices that actually do the job they're supposed to is well worth it. So.
Thank you. Frankly, it's respect as well, common sense as well as long-term value.
I would also put out they're going to be lighter, so they'll be much easier to carry around than they currently are. And hopefully they'll have wireless mouses, so we won't have to.
Who knows? Right, any other remarks on this? Okay. Do we agree to delegate responsibility to Councillor Jay?
Yes.
As described. Okay, thank you very much. Agreed? Okay. Thank you. I think that's the primary agenda resolved, in which case we go into... I beg your pardon? What's the matter with me? Oh, I beg your pardon. Recommendations from the scrutiny panel. I am getting ahead of myself. 9.3, Alison, thank you.
Okay, so again in my scrutiny appearance from the 10th of December, there were 2 recommendations that we request the involvement of the University of Essex in assessing local economic data and its relevance to the future growth of the City of Colchester to augment work done by our development team and identify how the school base in the local area has improved over the past year and what progress is being made towards a high wage economy and encourage large employers to locate to Colchester. Okay, so there's fairly limited resource available to local councils, and we're not actually funded for research of detailed data on a local basis. So the approach to understanding the economy at the high level is accessing and tracking trends in official data provided by the Office of National Statistics and other various departments. There are more in-depth analyses carried out and other data used to publish and address key issues through reports and webinars from think tanks and levels of official analysis such as the indices of multiple deprivation. More in-depth data is sought when there is a specific need to demonstrate the value of a project. So, for example, in terms of funding beds and the Town Deal and Levelling Up funding are examples of this. We do have regular meetings with the University of Essex, and this has become even more formalised since the Civic University Agreement was signed last year. In terms of other examples, the local plan is commissioning evidence support plan making decisions. So the underlying feedback is that economic impact is assessed at a project and programme level rather than a cross-district level, and that's where the focus on data is. That's where data is focused. There's a formal obligation for project owners to report back the outputs and outcomes of funded projects, and I recently had experience of that on the Rural England Prosperity Funding, where we gave funding to local rural businesses where they were expected to monitor, to come back to us. Also recently I've attended a meeting with the North Essex Economics Board, and we've just agreed to co-collaborate on intelligence and data collection. So that will help going forward in terms of a North Essex approach. In terms of the skill base, we have 2 skill centres, the Digital Skills Centre at the Wilson Marriage and the new Net Zero and Renewal Centre at Colchester Institute. These both received funding and support from the Shared Prosperity Fund. There's the new Digital Forum in Queen Street, and multi-million pound investments into the city provide infrastructure enabling economic growth. I've lost my way here a bit. I think the answer is that we're struggling a bit to find really detailed data, but we're accessing what is available and working with partners where we need to.
Thank you. And I think that's a very comprehensive reply showing the depth of knowledge actually that we do have, and those who do look at, for example, the economic strategy for the city will know it's underpinned, and a particular tribute to Karen Turnbull. It's not just her, I know, and she draws on many sources and colleagues' understanding, but you know, we actually, frankly, I think, do, given the base of resource we have, we do an excellent job here, and that understanding of place, people, business and relationship, that can sometimes be really important when investment decisions are made, or when we have to contribute, as we have done recently, into growth planning, and that's drawn on other skills as well. So thank you very much for your overview and your response to the recommendations. Is there anything else that you would like to draw to us? No. We note, I think, for the record, as the recommendations were really around considering, and the role of partnerships and all of that is worth just adding an extra weight to. We have developed in my time, I claim no more than a fraction of the credit for it. We've really strengthened those key relationships, including, as mentioned here, the University of Essex. And that's become organic. There is a natural interest rather than us having to request and go through a bureaucracy. We've now got relationships and links that make that productive in a much more natural way. Okay, so we move on then, Cabinet. Thank you very much. I was nearly moved on 3 items, so I'm back on track, I hope. Okay, so 10.1, I see no dissent, is next. Recommendations from the Environment Sustainability Panel in respect of Middlewick. We've got 2 visiting councillors, so in the normal way of these things, we'll invite you to speak in turn, and then I'll ask Andrea to respond on the basis of her understanding. So first of all, Councillor Mark Goldshire, and then Councillor Lee Scordis. Mark, please. Been a long wait for you, but I'm sure the rest was riveting.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an interesting meeting to sit into. I can't remember an issue since I got involved in local politics that seems to have galvanised so many local people than the issue of Middlewick Ranges. And we've seen in this very building demonstrations outside that have happened on quite a regular basis. There is a massive public interest in this issue. Not just from the wards that neighbour the Wick, Beerchurch, Newtown, etc., although certainly from those wards, but across the whole of Colchester. You have in front of you a document that is basically from the minutes of the Environment and Sustainability Panel. It reiterates many of the key points about the site. Its ecological value, the wide range of wildlife that you find on that site. It also reiterates that the nature emergency that we are in paragraph 2 of the document. We have lost 97% of our wildflower meadows since the war. 40% of species have declined since 1970. We are one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. We are in a nature crisis. We hear a lot about the climate emergency and crisis for absolutely valid reasons, but there is also a nature emergency, and we can't afford to lose sight of such ecological value as Middlewick Ranges in terms of acid grassland, to mention just one of the things. Now also there's public interest because we've heard a lot of reports about letters from Natural England that for some reason didn't reach councillors before this or that vote. We've heard about the prior report, ecological report to the Stantec report. We've heard about flaws in the Stantec report. We've heard about all this, and I won't reiterate all the ins and outs of it, but it just feeds into a public perception that rightly or wrongly, to quote Shakespeare's Hamlet, there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. And I think that a public meeting would serve several purposes. It would obviously address that latter point. It would provide transparency in discussion, in debate, but also it involves the public. It involves the people who are affected by this and gets them to have their say in a debate with councillors present and so on, but it's about the people ultimately. I remember going to one of the consultations with the developers on Middlewick. This is going back several years. And it was the one where the ecologist was there that claimed you could move badger sets. But in that consultation, I remember that there was an ordinary, well, I say ordinary, I don't mean that's a bit demeaning term, but there was a lady there with some young children. She was trying to explain to this ecologist just how much this site meant to her as a space for her kids to play, for her to kind of get away from it all and relax. She was floods of tears trying to explain this. To me, a public meeting is about giving that person and the many, many people like that person a chance to express their views on what, as I said, is probably the most controversial local planning issue I can think of since I got involved in this. It's about those people. It's not about Mark Goach. You all know my views on this, and probably a range of other councillors. It's about those people. So that's why I would urge you to look into, and set up a public debate on Middlewick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. If that's all right, I'd like to hear from Lee. Councillor Scordis, Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it was 2 weeks ago now, we had a walk on Wick with Councillor Luxor Vaughan was with us, Chair of Local Plan was with us, and ward councillors, with a chap from Natural England and one of the ecologists the council is using on this really complex site. And what became clear is we cannot build on the majority of this site. That was made very clear. The chap from Natural England told us that if he wanted to, he's got enough evidence to make the whole site a triple SI. But he knows it's much more complex. There's questions over who runs the site. The MOD does want money from this site. and how you manage the site, because the MOD have actually, well, the DOI, the way they've managed that site has created it in the way it is today. What was most staggering is that the Stantec report that was provided by the MOD, which was always suspicious, we were essentially told while we were on site that where we were standing, where the MOD wanted to build, and they were saying, this is where I would definitely say, whatever happens, you would never build here. This is the acid grassland that is completely rare to this country, but we'd never allow building here. So there are serious questions over this site, and there's serious questions over the local plan. And I know people get bored of it, but we have to be realistic. I do not think there will be many councillors who will be voting for a local plan that still has Middlewick in it. So officers do need to start writing up a plan of where these other homes go to. Even talking to these two experts, they were saying that developers are talking lower numbers now. They're not talking thousands, they're talking the low hundreds, because even they realise this site is too complex, and the places they could build are just too small. And then there's the cost of how you would deal with such a site. So my hope is we don't need a debate. Public debate, a common sense should prevail. The council needs a secondary plan, because we will not have a local plan if we continue down this route. And we know how vital it is to have a local plan. So I think we do need to start looking now, political leadership, for the officers to look at other sites, because this site is just not viable. We just can put our hands up and go, look, we got this wrong. People appreciate that when people admit they've made a mistake. And we were given false evidence by the MOD. It was rushed through, but we are where we are, and we're finding out that actually there's enough evidence here to make this one of the most important sites in Britain. And let's be honest, Colchester Council does not have a good record on protecting its heritage and other things when we built over the only existing Roman circus and many other things. Well, smashing a hole in the wall was the classic in the 70s. None of us were here. Some of you may have been children, but we don't have the best record on that stuff. I know we've got a great castle and other things, but we have made mistakes. Let's not make a mistake on this site. So my feeling is we need to prepare for this with the upcoming local plan meeting. We know it's going to be fiery. And we, as I say, we know the same argument is going to be made, but it's becoming clear from the experts we paid from Natural England that this site is not viable for 1,000 homes and may not be viable for any homes as it stands.
Thank you very much. I will offer a personal take on this, because of what I've felt outside this in terms of knowledge. If I'll be frank, I've caught myself up, then I'll go to Andrea for true knowledge. So a reaction would be, Ministry of Defence is my old department, as some of you know, and I knew the department who run our sites. In fact, I indirectly used to call upon services from them and wait a very, very long time for a response. So I know both the strengths and flaws of government, and I can see how this looks and the reality of it. And the reality of it is really clear. We've learned more. We have, and I'm careful, I don't like to use words false evidence, but certainly evidence, you're absolutely right, Lee, that's way off the mark. And I've walked that site as well, and you kind of think, well, how could we have accepted it on its face value? But that's what we do. We start at least with what is given to us, but it's not our site. It does require an understanding with the developer and the Ministry of Defence. You know, we need to remember our place in the grand scheme of things for me, and it is a fact. It is where it is in the local plan. But my own personal take is that I can see it as it's been described by yourself and Mark. It's clearly emotionally, there's a commitment. We need to build some trust. The conversation here and the point of this is about how, when we do have a legally binding proper process, we must follow through. But I hear no contradiction with that sense that our understanding today is much richer, and that the site is recognised for what it holds, and therefore the remarks about the scarcity of development potential, that sort of makes sense to me. But I'll defer to Andrea on this. Andrea.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, would be silly not to acknowledge the amount of public interest there has been in this site. I would suggest to Mark, come to Wivenhoe and stand in the car park if you want a more contentious issue than Middlewick Ranges. And I'm right in the centre of that, and that's extremely painful. And for, yeah, probably what that's doing is focusing the, the point that we need to follow process. We need to listen to the public, but we also need to do the jobs that we've got to do. I will point out that I have an overview of the local plan. I have absolutely no direction as to which sites will or will not be included in the plan. Neither does anybody on Cabinet. The people that make that decision are the local plan committee, after the recommendations have been put to them by the planning team. And obviously the planning team are qualified, they have collated all the evidence, and it will be their choice as to what you will see on the 17th of February. And I'm pretty confident that none of us will like it. Not specifically about Middlewick, but because I don't think anybody is going to escape the fact that we need to build a certain amount of houses a year on sites that we would probably argue are not appropriate. Following the scrutiny debate, the next day I got a call from officers saying, want to discuss this, want to know how you feel, because they had various concerns, and I actually share all of them, and they fall into three separate brackets really. So the first one is the prematurity of having a public meeting. So we are following a process which is, we've been collating evidence up until, now. A lot of it is still not ready to be published. None of us have seen it, the public haven't seen it, but it's, the date is the 17th. We've pushed that back once already. I've already asked if we can push it back again. We can't. We've got to wait for officers to deliver that. But what that will do is inform all of the sites. So they can't make a decision about one site in isolation. They have to look at all of the sites and all of the evidence, because yes, ecology is extremely important, but there are other aspects that we've looked at, we've consulted on, and it's about blending all of that together. Very, very difficult job, and then making balanced decisions about that. So we have to acknowledge that, I don't want to talk about Santec anymore. We acknowledged that this site was significant enough that we would go out and pay for an independent ecology report. That is in the public domain. But we also need to acknowledge that there's no other site, either in the old local plan or that may be included in the review, has had the benefit of such an independent report. So that sort of leads me into the next sort of concern, which is biased. As we heard from our speaker earlier, we've got a local plan meeting. We have considered the arrangements for Have You Say, but only 10 people are going to be allowed to speak. There's hundreds of sites. I think, personally, it would be unfair to allow an entire evening of debate about one site, which pretty much wouldn't be a debate, would it? Most of us don't like the idea of building on Middlewick. So, it would be a very one-sided debate, and yet every other person may or may not get 3 minutes. I think we've also got to bear in mind what I explained earlier, which is if the local plan committee are minded to accept the proposals put to them by officers on the 17th, then the whole plan will go out for a 6-week consultation. Now, we don't know yet whether Middlewick will be included in that, and if so, what numbers will be included in it. So that's back to the prematurity. In terms of following the process, I think we have to be equitable to every site, regardless of whether it's controversial or not, because, I've got councillors coming to me and saying, I don't even know if there are any houses in my ward, let alone what sites are going to be allocated. All we've had is a site selection exercise happen, and we know that some of them are no longer in the running, but we don't necessarily know which ones will be in the running. So, you know, there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress around this. I think we have to be equal and fair between every site, all the members of public that have different views on different sites and councillors. And then the last one is a very practical issue, which officers didn't raise, but I think it's worth saying this. As mentioned by my colleague, as soon as the independent ecology report was available, we knew that people would want to discuss it and analyse it and talk directly both to Natural England and the ecologist who produced it. So we organised a site visit. There were so many people that wanted to go. We split it in two halves. Very pleasant. 2 hours walking around with a man who could tell me the difference between a weed and something else and making me chew things. It was really informative. Natural England very succinctly put their position, and again I won't repeat that because Councillor Scordis did explain, you know, what their intentions are, the obstacles that they may have to pursuing their dream, as it were. But that was done deliberately because we knew people wanted an opportunity to talk directly to the people making, you know, analysis of issues on that site. If we then look at where we are now and the 17th of February, that's less than a month. Now, just trying to get an internal briefing for the local plan, we've had to move that because councillors have got so many clashes in their diaries. We'd also have to pull out all the officers trying to run that deadline, who are a man down as well, because there'll be very little point in going, and if technical questions come up, you know, none of us are necessarily qualified to answer them. And, you know, finding a venue, I just, the practicalities of trying to get an open meeting in the timescale we've got, I just don't think they're realistic. So on that basis, I think there's three reasons why we, although we understand and respect the amount of interest there is in this one site, we shouldn't actually have a public day at this time.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive reminder of both what we know, the practical issues that we have to face and the team have to face, and actually that equity point, that equality of service. We actually spent huge amounts of time on Middlewick for very understandable reasons. And there is an empathy and understanding that I think has grown. There's no question about that. And it's perhaps that's what I should make sure is plain and heard. Councillors who were good enough to come forward, Mark and Lee, I know you'll be listening to the response, even if it isn't the one you wanted. I hope you might understand it. Is there anything that any one of you feels you need to come forward again on? If not, I shall go to the recommendation. Lee.
I mean, one bit I forgot to mention, I mean, on this site, I mean, whatever happens, I think the MOD will probably try to dispose of it one way or another, whether it is literally, this costs us, I don't know, $1 million to run a year, let's get rid of it, we're not using the site anymore. So they may decide to dispose of it for free and give it to someone, I don't know. We don't know at all, but we just have to be wary of that going forward, or they may invest money in it and actually use it for what it was, a training ground, which I'd be happy with. Army needs somewhere to train. But I think that's just something to highlight as well. So we'll see how they progress on that. But as you know, they'll try and make as much money as they can out of it, but they may do a cost-benefit analysis and say, you know what, cut our losses, let's find someone who wants this site, and that saves us a lot of money, staff, and we'll pension off a load of people. So we'll see. Just to highlight that may be coming down the road in the future.
Thank you, Lee. I mean, I suspect in their terms, I mean, they deal with enormous volumes of land and assets and everything else. This is really, frankly, for them, a marginal issue. For us, it's really, you know, in ecology terms and local plan terms and the emotions around local plan, it's central. Anything any other colleague wants to offer, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I just think speculating about the future is incredibly dangerous and probably quite depressing. The best we can do is our local plan, but, you know, we've mentioned devolution earlier. The strategic planning will not be anything to do with this organisation. Plus, there is the appeal system. You know, the MPPF is also changing. We can do our best to protect any or all sites by including them or not including them in the local plan and building around them development documents that try and control them. But at the end of the day, if you've got a hungry developer, we are fighting with our hands tied behind our back, I would say.
Thank you. I mean, right, it'd be fair to say that under what we expect under devolution, whatever is the authority in our shoes, some might be within it, we'll see. We'll still have a planning function and decision and review requirement. Whatever the rule changes that might yet be made by central government is a fair point. All right, I'm going to close it there. If there's nothing else from colleagues, then as we've discussed, rather than repeat it, with regret and with an understanding of the passions that drove the committee to recommend a public debate, we cannot agree, but we manifestly have given it real thought within the scope of the authority we have. That is narrowly an executive matter. The wider piece is absolutely not that, as Andrew's described so well, falls to the local plan committee in due process. Are we content with that conclusion? Yes. Thank you very much. In which case we go to item 11.1. Just officers to my left, just wondering what I might leap to. In which case it's petitioners, public statements, questions and responses. Richard.
Chair, I have nothing to add to the report. I think it shows that all the issues have been dealt with.
Thank you. It really matters that we respond to the public and those who take the trouble to contact us here. I'm pleased to say this shows, that's what I see in person, that we are over responsive and as open as we can be. So thank you very much for the work of monitoring that. In which case we can, where I was 20 minutes ago, go to closing the public session before we go for one item, which is confidential. I go to the Deputy Leader, who hasn't got the words that we need to read. Perhaps I do.
You kindly give it to me. There we are.
There we
are. I move that in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the Local Authorities Regulations 2012, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the following items as they involve the likely disclosure of the exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 5 of Part 1 of the Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you very much.
Are we agreed?
We agreed?
Agreed.